My name is Brad Parks and want to welcome you to AccuShield Verify, a webinar today on credential verification for third-party care and vendors. We're going to talk through how you can increase occupancy, revenue, and your reputation through safety and security components with AccuShield and specifically AccuShield Verify. I'm Brad Parks. I'm part of the instructional design and training team here at AccuShield. So I help educate and train and support all of our current and future partners across the country and in Canada with AccuShield. Previous to my time at AccuShield, I spent over a decade in the field of public education, and my vision for the future with AccuShield is to help all senior living communities become as safe and secure as possible through the use and help of AccuShield. So that is what we'll cover today, specifically going through a few prompting questions for a brief community assessment, if you will, and that will revolve around safety, security, and risk mitigation. After we go through that community assessment, we'll talk through safety and security standards with AccuShield by learning about how AccuShield Verify can move the needle of security for you and your community. And by the end of today's webinar, you'll have next steps in front of you to be able to take action and make forward progress today. So let's go into that first item, the community assessment. What we're going to begin with in that community assessment is building safety. So the first question that we want to answer is, what physical protection measures are in place when entering your community? So if you think about your current setup, what it looks like from exterior to interior, what that safety and security looks like. So as you're thinking through that, we want to think, for example, how many exterior entrances are on campus? With that, is it secure entries at each location? How does one, let's say a visitor versus a resident versus a care provider, how do they gain access into your location? What kind of locking mechanisms are each of those entries equipped with? Are there covered entrances to mitigate slips and falls during inclement weather? So a lot of different items around that first question and what physical protection measures are in place when entering your community. The second question that we want to think through today is, do common areas and resident living spaces have safety measures in place? And I'm sure the answer is yes for all of us, but we have to think, to what extent is that answer yes? And then how can we continue to make sure that we move that forward and offer the most safe and secure environment for not only your residents, but also your staff and families, visitors, guests. So for example, do you have fall monitors in place, or do you have a physical staff presence in common areas while residents are also present? And of course, that can depend on the care type for residents, whether it's independent living in common areas or assisted living in certain areas or memory care spaces and different things like that. Another item to consider here is what kind of grab bars or railings or wheelchair accessibility is in place throughout the community, throughout common spaces, throughout residents' living quarters and rooms. And then as we go into our third question with this building safety component, I want to ask specifically, what trip or fall prevention practices are in place throughout inside and outside spaces? And as we think through those trip or fall prevention practices, maybe it's word of mouth from staff, maybe it's relaying information from caregiver to staff member, or a hourly, every other hour, or a regular monitoring of different spaces to make sure that there is no spills, leaks, any debris, any trip hazards in any part of the community. But I'm going to take this one step further with that specific question and go into what we have, and this is currently available to you with AccuShield, a fall and trip hazard prevention through the AccuShield kiosk. Now, while we will very much get into AccuShield Verify and making sure that you have credential verification in place, I want to touch on this really helpful tool that you can help by empowering certain visitors to create that community awareness and help reduce any fall or trip hazards. So for example, we'll walk through this screen, but you can ask specifically, let's say care providers, vendors, and volunteers, this exit question on the kiosk when those visitors specifically are leaving your community. Now, we want to target that specific audience so that we're not necessarily prompting families or guests or visitors of that nature for this kind of question. But what this can do is create, let's say, a community coalition, if you will, or an alliance for safety awareness. And this may not be applicable for every community, but we do have several communities with AccuShield who are already using this, and this is a highly recommended, available to you exit question. So that first screen on the left, we see where we're asking that question, did you notice any fall or trip hazards? And if that is simply no, then that exit question finishes up and that visitor heads out. But if the answer is yes, then that will prompt a follow-up question on the kiosk. So then that care provider, for example, can answer, is a staff member aware of this hazard? And if they select no, that kiosk will prompt an alert on the screen. And that's what we see in the middle of the screen there, that alert that pops up. And it prompts that caregiver or vendor or volunteer to go and immediately see a staff member for assistance and be able to relay that information to them. Now, the great part about this alert is that this can automatically trigger a real-time text and or email to any specific staff that you choose. So whether that is a business office manager, a concierge, an activities director, a director of resident care, anyone at all, that can go to that designated staff person via text or email. And then the great part about this is that when this fall or trip hazard prevention exit question is in place, as those caregivers, vendors, and volunteers have multiple visits into your community over the course of a few weeks, they are now beginning to think with a awareness of safety and security as they come into your community, because they know when they exit, they'll be prompted with this question. So now not only are you catching them on their exit from your location to make sure all is well, but as they come through your front doors, they're already keeping that thought front of mind to make sure that they will be able to correctly answer that exit question for any fall and trip hazards that may currently be in place. So a quick deviation into this incredible feature through the exit question for those specific visitor types. If you'd like any more information or you want to get this set up, you can do it on your own through the AccuShield dashboard at dashboard.accushield.com, or you can also email us at communitysupport@accushield.com. Again, that's communitysupport@accushield.com, and we'll be able to help you set that up as quick as today. The next item that we'll go into, going back to our community assessment, will be visitor safety. So we have another 3 questions here, moving from building safety into visitor safety. And the first question is simply, do we know who is on site at all times? And this can be identified through badges with the AccuShield kiosk printer that will print out that badge for every visitor who signs in. This can also be accessed through the visitor log on dashboard.accushield.com. So hopefully you have good quality answers to who is on site at all times through the use of the AccuShield kiosk sign-in, and then your internal staff accessing that dashboard to be able to have eyes on who is on site. The second question that we want to ask in our visitor safety component of this community assessment is, how do we keep accurate records of who is and has been on site? And we're going to go right back to that AccuShield kiosk for sign in and sign out for all visitors, whether it is a caregiver, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a family member, a volunteer, somebody on site for a tour. There is a visitor type for all who come in to your community. And by having everyone sign in and having those records on file, you are creating a culture of compliance. And now you can empower not only your residents, but your staff and any other visitors that if they see someone on site and they don't have a badge, that can prompt that quick conversation and question of, hey, did you sign in when you came through our front doors today? And if they didn't, can quickly redirect them to the front entry, the AccuShield kiosk, and make sure that you have accurate records of who's on site, and then also have that badge printed so that visitor can have that on showing they have a verified and successful sign in. And going with that second question of how do we keep accurate records, you can always go into your dashboard, dashboard.accushield.com, access the visitor log, and you can search previous days, weeks, months, and years to find any historical data and reporting as needed for any conversation or any questions or any transparency that you need to have insight into for any of those items that come up, whether it be from an annual audit or inspection, from an adult-child conversation, or anything in between. And then the third question that's really going to take us down the road of AccuShield Verify and that credential verification process is, how do we vet our third-party and private care? So third-party care, third-party vendors, anyone coming in that nature. And that is where we'll go into a quick example here of, let's call her Jane. So if Jane comes in and signs into the AccuShield kiosk, let's say this is Jane's first time into your community. How do you vet that Jane meets your standards as a community? That Jane, you can say confidently that she can provide care to your residents, and you know that all is taken care of. Jane meets your standards. You have documentation on file in a quick and easy, accessible way. And you can also market that, not necessarily Jane to your different prospective residents, but you can market that that level of safety and security to prospective residents, that you have that process in place, and private care and vendors meet those standards to come into and provide that care and visit to your residents. So let's say on Jane's first visit into your community, she's going to sign into the AccuShield kiosk. And that kiosk is going to ask some prompting questions, and that will be recalled on any subsequent visits that Jane comes in for. So she will not have to do this every time, but a couple of the questions that we'll see is Jane will answer if she's here on behalf of a company or an agency, if she's self-employed or a part of a company. And then she'll choose what kind of services she's providing. And then she'll choose her reason for visit, which with private care or things like that will most often be visiting a resident. So this is where we go back to the reporting capabilities, where you'll always have insight into how long those visits lasted, the time in, the time out, Jane, the company she's associated with, and what service she was providing for as many residents as she's doing that for. But if we go one step further and really lock in on the safety and security component, we want to make sure that Jane has the right items in place where, again, you feel confident about being able to have Jane inside of your community. And so AccuShield Verify is where we will go now. And we want to cover the details behind AccuShield Verify, how this is currently available to you, and want to be able to empower you to take those next steps by partnering and continuing to partner with AccuShield in the process. So we want to walk through some of the questions, the why, the what, the how, and the when through AccuShield Verify. So we'll start with the why. And in short, AccuShield Verify enhances the standard of safety and security within your community. Now, this enhancement aligns yourself with industry standards in senior living, and it can help in marketing, it can help in occupancy, and it can help in raising the quality of care that's coming inside of your building. And ultimately, this is giving you the visibility and the transparency that you need for your third-party care and vendors. You don't want to just trust that those providing care to your residents are cleared and meet your standards. You want to know, but without adding more work to your plate. And we recognize that everyone here today, and for those that maybe couldn't make it today because they have all these different obligations, we know that you have a lot on your plate, and we don't want to just add one more item for you to have to work through. And that is why we are partnering with communities through the credential verification process. And we know that a lot of care providers and vendors, let's say home health and hospice, are required to have these documents, and they do, but there are some agencies where we have seen that maybe don't do as good of a job with this credential verification as others that do a great job with this. And this why will help elevate the standard of care that comes into your community. So going back to home care and self-employed, just to clarify there, for example, there may not be as much regulation to provide various documents to your community. But however, those who choose to participate in meeting your standards as a community, they're then able to grow their business. They can strengthen their relationship with your community. They can help elevate your community's reputation in the local area while also bringing in more prospective residents, because that quality and vetting of those care providers and vendors coming inside your walls, they again meet your standards, and you have the confidence, the trust, and the knowledge that all is good and cleared with those visitors. So that's a little bit of the why. Let's jump into the what with AccuShield Verify. And we'll see a little bit of information on the screen here, but essentially the documents that are being gathered or submitted to AccuShield for verification, these can be customized for your needs. These can be customized for your preferences. And again, these documents are submitted directly to AccuShield in a simplified manner. We'll go through the details of that, but we want you to know that as we partner with you in this process, AccuShield is here to carry this lift for you. And so once these documents have been submitted to AccuShield and approved, you as a community, you'll have visibility to see all of these credentials through the AccuShield dashboard. And again, that's accessible at dashboard.accushield.com. And while we hope that you do not necessarily need to access these documents on a regular basis, AccuShield Verify will ensure that if or when the time comes, you have the necessary information in place for those providing care and service to your residents. And as an example, you see it on the bottom left-hand side of the screen here, but we have some different documents that are standard in this process. A criminal background check, for example, that includes a 7-year address history for individuals and also includes a national sex offender registry check. We also have the proof of negative TB test, again, for individuals, and this can be based on specific care type if you would like to require that for care providers, different items like that. We also have the proof of employment for individuals and a company document, proof of insurance, which typically we see as the commercial general liability insurance at 1 mil, 3 mil, and the workers' compensation insurance for 100K and 500K. Now, I know that's a lot of details and kind of getting into some of the nitty gritty of that, but let's briefly visit the how of this process, which we'll go to here in just a moment. But while we're here on this screen, I want to cover how this process works, which again, we'll continue to elaborate on in our remaining time. But the agency on their own dashboard, they will upload their documents that are required. And that dashboard for companies, that is called the Service Provider Exchange, or what we call in short specs. So the Service Provider Exchange, or specs, is a dashboard very similar to the AccuShield dashboard, but built and created for companies, agencies, private care to be able to access and then upload documents. They can see a lot of the different details around what their business looks like, what kind of growth potential there is, and how they can continue to strengthen those relationships with your community or other different communities in the local area. They can see what documents are required, and then they can make sure that they have the opportunity to meet those standards for each community in which they serve. Now, a self-employed individual, they'll upload their documents through the mobile app, AccuShield Mobile. We'll talk more on that here in just a moment, but let's go a little bit more into the how and the different resources that are available with AccuShield Verify. Now, here at AccuShield, as we do this together with you and your community, we are partnering with you, and we have template letters available for you to communicate this verification process of credentials to your care and service providers. So this letter that you see on the left-hand side, this is just a template, but gives some great clarity around the language that's involved with this process. And by you looking through this as yourself, let's say a business office director, an executive director, or even a concierge, and that critical touch point into the community, Now you can easily relay this information by simply handing this memo, handing this letter, or being able to talk to a couple items in there and direct that caregiver or that vendor or that company to AccuShield for any questions, any follow-ups, and being able to submit those documents. But this gives clear and concise language to this verification process, and that is why this is in place. So again, a great resource to share with your team and equip them with those talking points and the language around the safety and security standard. Now, the next item that you have available to you will be the badges that print out from the badge printer. I want to take a moment to talk through the details of this, because this is a great way to, or a great time to also bring up how you can utilize that AccuShield printer for not only awareness of who needs to submit documents, but also continue to provide great customer service. If you're in a scenario where, let's say, your concierge is in that front part of the community, that welcome area during regular office hours or business hours, you can have that badge printer face the concierge or be down, let's say, right next to the concierge. So then the concierge will receive that badge when any visitor signs in, and they can first see the name of that visitor, see what visitor type they're signing in as, and if they have credentials that are required, you'll see that in the badge on the top right. This invites the quick conversation and the education piece for that concierge to that care provider, to that vendor, to let them know, hey, we have some documents that we need you to submit just to make sure and ensure that you meet our standards and can continue to provide this care to our residents or to this particular resident or group of residents. And then that concierge can give that great customer service, welcome that visitor by name. If they're all cleared with their documents, continue to welcome them by name by handing that badge to them. So again, that top badge that we see there on the right-hand side, it does not deny entry for that visitor, for that care provider. This just allows that education piece and that communication and the relay of that communication to take place between the concierge and the visitor, or the badge and that visitor. Now, the other items that you'll see print out, the bottom left badge, that will identify what documents need to be submitted. So when a caregiver or a vendor comes in and you have those specific customized documents in place, this lets them know what they need to submit to AccuShield. Now, they can take that bottom left badge if they're self-employed and do that themselves, or they can take that back if they're a part of a company or an agency, take that to their business office manager or to their HR team, and that individual can upload the documents for the entire company into SPEX, that service provider exchange. And then that badge on the bottom right, if a company is not yet uploaded into the service provider exchange, this will give a contact badge with a QR code for them to be able to scan and send in that contact information, be a part of the SPEX platform, and be able to submit those documents in a timely manner. So those are the badges that will print out. And again, does not deny entry, but invites in the conversation and the education piece of AccuShield Verify and the standards that you have in place. The next item that we do have here is our credential cards, and these will come to you with your quarterly badge shipments. So these are cards that you can hand to service providers, you can hand to caregivers, you can hand to agencies, and they can have this piece of information as just another way to help communicate the process that's in place to make sure that you have those caregivers and vendors meet your standards. So you can hand these to one per each company, to an individual, but this again will have that QR code in place and just helps relay that information in another way. So the badges, the letter, and these credential cards. Now, as we've given a little bit of context to how this process works, we also want to be able to answer some different questions and invite you to put different questions that you have into the chat, but we'll take a moment and answer these few questions before we go into an open Q&A session. So as we go into these first four, we see what is the cost of AccuShield Verify. And want you to know that the cost is the responsibility of the agency or of the company or of the individual. And that cost is $9 per month But with that cost comes unlimited visits to unlimited AccuShield communities. So if I go into AccuShield Community A in the local area and I visit 8 times per month, I am only charged one $9 fee. So that does not duplicate. And if I go into Community B in the local area and visit 4 times per month, then I am still charged the single $9, no matter how many AccuShield communities I go to, nor how many times I go to them within the month. And if I do not visit any AccuShield communities during the month, then I am not charged that $9 fee. So no one is billed prior to using the system and AccuShield managing and verifying those documents. So that is a part of this process, and that awareness we want to make sure is in place for the cost of that. So for the community, no cost in place. It is the responsibility of the company, the agency, or the self-employed. Now that leads us right into the second question. What if a caregiver or a vendor does not want to participate? And that's such a good question. We hear that often, and we have some great answers and language around that. And we'll start with this. Ultimately, it is a business decision for each service provider, for each company, for each self-employed. And it is completely up to that individual or that company if they want to participate in your credential verification process and meeting your standards to provide care to your residents. Now, the vast majority of service providers that are going into your communities are a part of agencies or companies that are already using this credential verification process, or AccuShield Verify, in other locations. So it's not necessarily even a matter of bringing them in. It's just giving them more opportunities to grow their business at different locations with AccuShield. But again, this will help elevate that quality of care coming in. And if a company chooses to not participate and they don't want to submit those documents for verification, then that can help other agencies, other companies, or self-employed grow their business within your community and go back to that earlier comments of strengthening the relationships and the partnerships with those who you can say assuredly meet your community standards. So as one company decides to use it or another company decides not to, again, you can always have those recommendations and referrals in place for those companies, individuals that do meet your community standards. The third question here is, what if a caregiver or vendor does not submit documents in the given time frame? And that is where all of these different communication pieces come into play. And if you take maybe 45 days or 6 weeks or so to communicate these pieces of information, these educational talking points, this can help bring those those companies or agencies on board by submitting those documents. And then if it does come down to it, you can look to have a short, brief conversation of saying something like, hey, if we don't have these documents submitted by this date, then we'll need to have the conversation of transitioning care to someone who does meet our community standards and have these documents verified and in place. And oftentimes, the large majority, we see that actually will motivate companies and agencies to really have these documents uploaded into specs to be verified in a very timely manner. So we often hear through our daily routines that nothing motivates like a deadline. And certainly as you communicate this, that same will be in effect with this process. And that bottom question there is, how can we know which caregivers or vendors we need to follow up with? And another great question. This is where you can utilize a report that is in the AccuShield dashboard. It's called dashboard.accushield.com. That's where you access it, and it'll be under reports and under the compliance report. So that compliance report is going to show you what different companies or agencies are coming into your community, how often they've been there in the month, and what percentage of compliance they have. So if they've submitted 1 document or 2 documents, or let's say they're 50% of the way there, 75% of the way there, 90% of the way there, and you can see who is meeting that compliance, who is not, and who you can reach out to or send to, whether it's an email to them, you can send them to AccuShield, You can CC our agency support team, which is agencysupport@accushield.com. And you can copy us on those emails to those companies, those agencies, or self-employed, and we can make sure that they are on board with specs and are able to upload those documents for verification. So that is how you can know who to follow up with using that compliance report on the AccuShield dashboard under reports. So that's a quick look at the FAQs, but any other questions you have, highly recommend put those into the Q&A portion, and we'll be able to answer those here in just a few moments. But what we want to do next is go into a quick next step. And what we're going to do is bring up a survey that you can see in the top right corner of the screen. You should be able to click into start the survey. And we want to take just a moment and figure out what is the best next step for you and your community. And we see that second question there of where is that metaphorical needle for this process in where you currently are. So I'm going to flip my screen over and I'm going to zoom in here so that we can see this a little bit easier. And just very briefly, we recognize each of our partners find themselves on a different part of that safety and security spectrum. So we have just a few questions. I'll scroll down as we go through this page, but we see some very quick answers there. First name, last name, your title or role in the community, your community name, and your email. This is going to make sure that we can follow up with the right information after today's webinar. So this first question, current community culture. So as it relates to safety and security specifically, I want you to check one or choose one of these options, or you can type in your own with other, and want you to be able to answer this correctly. Do all visitors sign in? Does everyone wear a name badge? And all credentials are accurately collected and verified and stored for third-party care and vendors? Or is it more on that third option, few visitors sign in or out, name badges seem to be optional, and we don't have credentials collected and verified for third-party care, or somewhere in between, or you can again put in other there. The second question that we see is, what would be the most notable or immediate resource or piece of help that would help move the needle for the credential verification process in your community? Would you like something like a caregiver and vendor letter template like what we showed earlier in our webinar today? Would you like a list of companies entering your community to have that in one quick, accessible file? Would you like a set of those credential cards to be able to hand out to those coming in? Or would you like AccuShield to reach out to the top 10 agencies that are serving your community? We've already begun and continue to have outreach in key markets, very successful conversations, and really a lot of excitement from agencies and companies to be able to have specs available to them. Would you like a private training session with AccuShield? We can go into the specific setup of your community. We can make sure that we hit any individual questions that you might have and cover that catered to you. Or do you need to acquire an AccuShield scanner for self-employed document uploads? Of course, if you have any others that would be helpful, you can enter those in there. Choose as many of those as you'd like. And then the third question is, are there any other immediate or additional needs where AccuShield can provide help or assistance for your community visitor management process and or the credential verification process? So a quick look there. If you'd like to add anything in, you can, and we will make sure that we look at that and have some quick follow-up with you. That's a look at that survey. You can continue to fill that out. Take a moment to finish that up. And I'm just going to zoom out here so I can flip back over, and we'll keep moving through the last bit of our time together here today. So we're going to move into a Q&A session, and we're going to invite into the stage here in this webinar now our Vice President of Operations, Sean Simons, and we'll bring him onto the screen here and go through some different Q&A that we have in place.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Saw the question from Adam. How do service providers know what documents to submit, and how do they submit those? So when you're typically launching the AccuShield Verify product from the very first time, you send out a letter to those agency companies. We recommend, if you're relaunching right now, do the same thing. Find your key agencies that y'all are working with that serve your residents, send out a letter to them. And then there's 3 additional ways. You've got the badges that print out on the printer. You've got the mobile app, which is also a way that self-employed providers can submit their documents. And then you've got the specs platform, that service provider exchange that Brad mentioned, that is the AccuShield dashboard for the companies as they're seeing the documents, submitting the documents, et cetera. So that's how they can see what requirements your specifically community has. So if you change or you add a document in, they can get a notification there. They can see those, so they can also submit them there. And then Jessica was asking, what are the best strategies to get service providers to submit? So once again, we'd like to talk through the first 4 to 6 weeks when you're either launching or relaunching as kind of an education phase. So you're really focused on making sure all of those service providers know what the expectations are, what the policy is, ensure that those companies have that same information, because typically the agency administrator is the one that is submitting on behalf of their employees. And then leveraging the tools that Brad mentioned. So those badges, the letter, the credentialing cards, ensuring that they are all being handed out and that those conversations are happening at the kiosk. And then you transition from that education phase into enforcement. And hopefully at that point, you've got your key agencies that you really want to partner with and have those deeper relationships. And you're able to send out a different communication to the agencies that are not on board yet. And just say, hey, by this particular date, we really want to make sure that we know whether you're going to participate in our program or not. Please let us know so that we can kind of move forward with those conversations with families if we need to. Oh, and then Lindsay, what about private duty self-employed providers? How does this work for them? So, communities obviously have different levels or numbers of self-employed compared to agency providers. Most communities agree, though, that is the highest risk population because they're not vetted, and as Brad kind of shared, there's not the same level of regulation around, obviously self-employeds. So it's important to make sure that we are collecting their documents, that they are participating. Oftentimes it's a little bit more like herding cats. You do have to have a concerted effort, oftentimes at that front desk with the concierge. The mobile app is the key. Making sure that they're downloading the mobile app where they can see the requirements, that they can actually submit those documents through their mobile app. Oftentimes it will mean you get a family involved and you have a family conversation so that they know, hey, here are the 3 service providers that are caring for your mom. Just want to make sure, help those service providers to get their documents in and get submitted.
Fantastic. Well, I think I'm back here. I might have been frozen for just a little bit, but Sean, any other additional comments on the credential verification process or kind of how you've seen this come from inception to now where it is now, being very beneficial for both communities and companies coming in?
Yeah. So I think I've seen agencies that typically do a good job of hiring and vetting and training their people. They'll push back when a community says, hey, this is our policy. But oftentimes if that community gets that agency on board early, they'll actually grow their business quite a bit through this process, because the community will actually wind up with some agencies or individuals that don't participate. And so the residents require obviously the same amount of care. And so those partners are able to deeper their relationships and grow their business. And it only fortifies those bonds between the two. The value of the new dashboard that we've built for the service providers, the feedback we've gotten from agencies is just phenomenal. They love it. They love the market share, being able to see where they're able to grow their business. So I feel like we're able to offer them more value than ever before as well, which is just great.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for going through those Q&As. If anybody else has anything else, please feel free to put those in there. We'll get ready to finish up our time today, but want to thank everybody for coming on. Want to thank Sean for spending a little bit of time with us today and going through some of that. He's had incredible insight just to see how this has progressed through the years, how AccuShield just continues to create solutions for communities to help in this lift, in this process. And as we get ready to close it out today, just want to offer up a quick thank you to everybody who has joined us today, or if you're watching this as a recording, thank you for jumping on and viewing that. If you have any questions at all, you can reach out to anyone here at AccuShield, but we have some of our support teams down at the bottom there, the bottom left, community support at AccuShield.com for anything that you'd like to ask about with the dashboard or any functionalities of the different tools in place. And then we also have our tech support team at the bottom right for anything with our hardware, whether it's a kiosk, a badge printer, or anything in that nature. But we're excited to continue to partner with you through this credential verification process. AccuShield Verify is a fantastic tool for you to be able to utilize and continue to make forward progress with to make sure that you have those safety and security standards met for everyone coming into your community, especially third-party care and vendors. So thank you one more time to everybody today. Have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll be in touch soon.